The visitor badge printed before Sophia Reyes asked the woman's name. Vendor hold. Executive escort required. The label appeared in black letters under a barcode that would not open the executive elevator, the boardroom door, or the hallway where the company kept its most important decisions behind glass. Adrienne Cole looked at the badge in Sophia's hand. She did not reach for it right away. Across the lobby, the morning light moved over the marble floor of Cole Langford Tower, the building that still carried her name in steel above the entrance. The letters outside had not changed. Almost everything else had. The warm wood panels she and Peter Langford chose years ago were gone. The founder wall was gone. The old photograph of the two of them standing in front of a rented garage in Atlanta was gone. In its place, near the elevator bank, hung a single framed portrait of Grant Hollis, current Chief Executive Officer, smiling, centered, lit from above. Adrienne had not entered this building in 5 years. After Peter died, she had stepped back from daily operations because she trusted the team he left behind. She still held majority control. She still had founder rights written into the original charter, but she let the company breathe without her hand on every switch. That had been the promise. Let them run it. Trust the work. Do not let grief turn into control. For 5 years, she kept that promise. Then, 3 weeks ago, an email arrived in her personal inbox with no signature and one subject line. They think the name on the building is only decoration. Attached were documents that did not belong outside an executive server. A board summary that understated the company's value. A draft acquisition deck from Dominion Petrogrid. A side letter offering private compensation to Grant Hollis and Nolan Price. A slide marked Post-Founder Transition Complete. Adrienne spent 2 weeks verifying every file before she booked the flight to Atlanta. She did not call ahead. She did not announce herself. She walked into the lobby in a plain black suit, with no entourage, no visible jewelry except a thin gold watch, and a leather folder pressed beneath one arm. Sophia Reyes met her at the reception desk. Sophia was efficient, polished, young enough to have joined the company after Adrienne's photograph had been removed from onboarding materials. She looked at Adrienne's suit, then at the folder, then at the empty space where an executive badge should have been. "Can I help you? I'm here for the board session." Sophia's expression stayed professional. "Do you have an appointment?" "No." A small pause. "Not rude. Worse than rude. Administrative. The executive floor is restricted during board sessions," Sophia said. "I can place you in the visitor queue." Adrienne watched her fingers move across the reception screen. Visitor type. Vendor. Escort required. No search for founder archive. No question beyond appointment status. No name. The printer clicked. The badge came out warm. Sophia clipped it into a plastic holder and offered it across the counter. Adrienne took it. The clip was cheap metal, the kind that bent once and never sat straight again. "You can wait along that hallway," Sophia said, pointing past the lobby toward the glass-walled executive wing. "Someone will come out when they're available." Adrienne looked through the glass. Inside the boardroom, men in dark suits sat around the long table Peter had once hated because it made people feel too far apart. Grant Hollis stood at the screen. Nolan Price sat beside him with a tablet open and a pen held like a blade. Behind them was the Dominion Petrogrid logo. Adrienne walked to the hallway chairs and sat down. The leather was cold. Employees passed. Some glanced at the badge. Vendor hold. Then they looked away. A woman with an analyst folder slowed for half a step, saw the label, and kept walking. A man from investor relations held the executive door open for someone behind Adrienne, but not for her. Adrienne did not stop him. She looked at her watch. 1 minute. Grant changed slides. Strategic alignment vote. 2 minutes. Nolan leaned toward the table and smiled without showing teeth. 3 minutes. Sophia passed the hallway again, carrying a tray of water bottles for the boardroom. She saw Adrienne still sitting there. She did not ask her name. 4 minutes. Adrienne opened her phone and took one photograph of the badge against her jacket. 5 minutes. She photographed the boardroom screen reflected in the glass. 6 minutes. The slide changed again. Founder legacy risk. Adrienne stood. She removed the badge from her lapel and placed it inside the leather folder, clipped to the front page of the original charter. Then she sent one message to Malcolm Voss, the general counsel seated at the far end of the boardroom table. I am in the hallway. Do not speak yet. Preserve everything. Through the glass, Malcolm looked down at his phone. His face changed by less than an inch. Grant Hollis turned back to the screen, one hand lifted toward the vote summary. Adrienne placed her hand on the boardroom door. The badge in her folder still read Vendor Hold. The charter beneath it still carried her signature. Adrienne opened the boardroom door without knocking. Grant Hollis stopped speaking, but the screen behind him did not stop glowing. Strategic Alignment Vote. The words sat above the Dominion Petrogrid logo, like a polite cover over something already rotten. Every face at the table turned toward her. No one stood. Nolan Price looked first at the badge clipped inside her folder, then at her face, then passed her toward Sophia in the hallway. This is a closed session, Nolan said. Adrienne stepped inside and let the door settle behind her. She did not raise her voice. She did not rush. Her eyes moved from the screen to the acquisition deck open on Nolan's tablet. Why is Dominion using our internal degradation model in their buyer presentation? That was the first silence that mattered. No dramatic. Technical. The kind of silence made by people realizing the wrong person knows the right detail. Grant recovered first. I'm sorry. I don't believe we've met. No, Adrienne said. You removed the wall that would have helped. A few executives glanced toward the glass, as if the missing founder wall could still be seen from there. Nolan closed his tablet halfway. Ms., this is not an appropriate place for product questions. Sophia, call security. Sophia stood frozen beyond the door. Adrienne walked to the long table and placed the leather folder beside the chair at the head. Peter's chair. Then Harris. Then, for 5 years, the company's... Grant kept one hand on the chair back. That seat is occupied. Adrienne looked at his hand, then at the charter page beneath the visitor badge. This seat is documented. Grant's expression cooled. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Cole Langford Systems. The board recognizes my authority to run this meeting. Then the board should recognize the document that created the company before it recognizes the man currently standing beside its chair. At the far end of the table, Malcolm Voss lowered his eyes to the message on his phone. I am in the hallway. Do not speak yet. Preserve everything. He had been waiting 3 weeks to see whether she would come. He had not expected the badge. He stood slowly. Before security enters, Malcolm said, the share registry should be checked. Grant turned. Sit down, Malcolm. Malcolm did not sit. Nolan's jaw tightened. You are general counsel, not theater. No, Malcolm said. I am general counsel. That is why I am asking the room not to create another record before verifying control. Adrienne opened the folder. The visitor badge lay clipped to the first page. Vendor Hold. Executive Escort Required. Beneath it was the original charter, signed by Adrienne Cole and Peter Langford in blue ink, before the company had a tower, before it had a lobby, before anyone in this room had a title worth protecting. Adrienne tapped one section with her finger. Continuity clause. Grant gave a short laugh without humor. That clause has never been used. Misconduct does not expire because no one expected it. She took out her phone and called Beatrice Lane, Corporate Records Officer. The call went to speaker. Board records, Beatrice said. Beatrice, this is Adrienne Cole. I am invoking the continuity clause under suspected fiduciary breach. Authorization phrase. Langford Garage, winter rain. There was a pause long enough for Nolan to look at Grant. Then keys moved on Beatrice's end. Identity confirmed, Beatrice said. Majority shareholder status confirmed. Founder control rights confirmed. Emergency transfer of operational authority is active. Pending external counsel review. Board vote is paused. No one moved. Security arrived in the doorway then, 2 guards with hands near their belts and confusion already on their faces. Nolan pointed toward Adrienne. Remove her. Adrienne looked at the guards. Stay where you are. You may be needed as witnesses. The first guard looked at Grant. Grant did not answer quickly enough. Adrienne spread the evidence across the table. A side letter from Dominion Petrogrid. A compensation schedule for Grant Hollis, and Nolan Price. A valuation model adjusted downward before the board review. An internal memo that read, Cole has been absent long enough to manage around her. A communications draft prepared for the sale announcement. Legacy shareholder with limited operational context. Adrienne let the pages sit where everyone could read them. She did not accuse first. The documents did. Nolan reached toward the side letter. Malcolm put one hand on the page. Do not touch that. Grant's voice went flat. This is privileged material. It is evidence, Adrienne said. Behind them, Sophia had not moved from the doorway. She saw the visitor badge on top of the charter. She saw the words she had printed without asking a name. For the first time that morning, her face changed for reasons that had nothing to do with procedure. Then Malcolm's phone buzzed. He looked down. So did Adrienne. An alert from IT security. Executive deletion protocol initiated. Source account. Nolan Price. Target folders. Battery archive. Clean storage patents. Board correspondence. Valuation models. Adrienne looked at Nolan. He looked back with the face of a man who had planned for losing. Lock all executive credentials, Adrienne said. Malcolm was already dialing. Grant stepped away from the chair. Nobody touches the system until my counsel. The system is being touched right now, Adrienne said. On the screen, the acquisition deck disappeared as IT forced a remote lock. A red warning replaced it. External transfer interrupted. The room no longer belonged to the men who had called the vote. It belonged to the record. The red warning held on the boardroom screen. External transfer interrupted. Nolan Price looked at it for less than a second before he reached for his phone. The first security guard stepped forward. Sir, the guard said, please place the phone on the table. Nolan stared at him. This is an executive device. Adrienne looked at the guard. It was. That was enough. The guard held out his hand. Nolan did not surrender the phone immediately. He looked at Grant first, as if permission still lived there. Grant said nothing. Nolan placed the phone on the table with 2 fingers. Not gently. Malcolm Voss took an evidence sleeve from the side pocket of his legal folder. He did not touch the phone with his bare hand. He slid it inside, sealed the top, and wrote the time across the white strip. Sophia watched from the doorway. She had handled calendars, visitor queues, board lunches, flight changes, and private cars for the men in this room. She knew how power usually moved. It did not usually get put in a plastic sleeve. Adrienne turned to Grant. Your credentials are being revoked. Grant's face hardened. You are making a public mistake. No, Adrienne said. You made a private one. I am putting it where the board can see it. On Malcolm's laptop, the access dashboard refreshed. Grant Hollis, executive access suspended. Nolan Price, executive access suspended. Board vote status, paused under founder control authority. The words appeared without emotion. That made them harder to argue with. Grant looked around the table, searching for someone willing to rescue him with procedure. A vice president near the middle lowered his eyes to the packet in front of him. Another executive turned one page of the side letter and stopped when he reached the compensation schedule. Nobody defended the numbers. Nolan tried one more angle. This material was taken unlawfully. Malcolm answered this time. It was delivered to the majority shareholder under a whistleblower preservation claim after internal reporting channels failed. Nolan looked at him. You sent it. Malcolm did not look away. I preserved it. That distinction landed with more weight than a confession. Adrienne collected the charter but left the visitor badge on the table. Vendor hold. Executive escort required. She turned it so every person could read it. This was printed for me before anyone asked my name. Sophia's throat moved. Adrienne did not look at her yet. This badge is not the reason you are losing control of this room, Adrienne said. It is the reason none of you noticed you had already lost control of the company. Grant pushed back from the chair. I will not be humiliated in front of my own team. Adrienne looked at Peter's chair, then at the screen, then at the evidence spread across the table. This was never your team. The guards escorted Grant first. He walked out with his shoulders straight, but his badge failed at the boardroom door. The reader blinked red. Once. Then again. The guard opened the door for him from the inside. That small sound did more than any speech could have done. The man whose portrait filled the lobby could no longer open the room he had been selling. Nolan followed, with Malcolm carrying the sealed phone behind him. He did not look at Sophia as he passed. When the door closed, the boardroom did not become peaceful. It became usable. Adrienne looked to Malcolm. External counsel. Independent audit. Full system image before anyone touches a file. Already in motion. I want the board portal frozen and copied. Yes. Whistleblower mailbox? Malcolm hesitated. Adrienne saw it. Where does it route? Malcolm looked down at the packet. Nolan's office. Several faces at the table changed at once. Not surprise. Recognition arriving late. Adrienne nodded once. Move it to outside counsel before lunch. Sophia stepped into the room. Her hands were no longer wrapped around the tablet. They hung at her sides. Miss Cole. Adrienne turned. I need to give you something. Sophia placed her tablet on the table and opened the visitor management screen. Adrienne Cole. No name entered. Visitor type. Vendor. Escort required. Created by Sophia Reyes. Timestamp. 9:40. 1 in the morning. Sophia's voice stayed steady, but only because she made it. I did not ask your name. I can say I was following process, but the process gave me choices. I chose the fastest one. Adrienne looked at the screen, then at Sophia. Save it. Sophia nodded. And the elevator logs, she said. They will show you were held outside while the vote packet was active. Malcolm looked at her with new attention. Sophia did not look proud. That helped. Adrienne picked up the visitor badge and clipped it back onto the charter page. Good, she said. Not forgiveness, not punishment. A record. Outside the boardroom, employees had started gathering at a distance, not close enough to be accused of watching, not far enough to pretend they did not know. Adrienne saw them through the glass. The company she built was still there, not in the portrait, not in the chair, in the people waiting to learn which version of the truth would be allowed to stay. She closed the folder. Take me to its security. The boardroom screen still showed the red warning. External transfer interrupted. For the first time that morning, the interruption belonged to the right person. This story is fictional,